to The Catholic Perspective, a podcast brought to you by rcspirituality.org. Enjoy the episode.
Some straight talk about the practice of prayer.
There's a big difference between Christian prayer and the various transcendental meditation techniques that have become popular in recent years, most of which have been borrowed and distorted from East Asian religious practices. A big difference. In their purest form, these techniques are based on some deep insights into human nature, and for centuries have fostered real self-mastery by helping people temporarily empty the soul of inner turbulence, thereby producing a sense of tranquility. But it stops there. At least, the original masters wanted it to stop there. In recent decades, Western innovators have manipulated that state of tranquility to channel unseen forces of the universe, at times even reaching out to anonymous spirits and gallivanting with them around the celestial airways. A very dangerous and highly unchristian game. In any case, this form of meditation stops short of real prayer, because it is wholly self-centered. Instead of opening yourself up to God and speaking to Him about His plans and His kingdom, you turn in on yourself and try to achieve heightened states of consciousness. In Christian prayer, the focus is on an interpersonal friendship, not just personal feelings, and that depends on faith, something utterly irrelevant to self-mastery techniques. It's a lot easier to learn a technique than to strengthen the virtue of faith, which involves battling the great enemies of prayer, sloth and distraction. That's why so many Christians are seduced into substituting these techniques for authentic Christian prayer. But techniques don't help us grow in friendship with God. Prayer does. And growth in prayer requires growth in faith. The stronger my faith is, the weaker the influence of sloth and distractions will be, as was seen in the talk on the battle of prayer. In practice, we would all like to slay the evil dragons of sloth and distraction once and for all. But that's impossible, at least in this life. The church on earth is the church militant. We are at war. We are engaged in battle. Therefore, sloth and distraction will be your constant companions. The question then is not, how do I slay them once for all? But how do I battle them more effectively so that they lose their dominance over my prayer life? And the answer is easy. Increase my faith. St. Paul provides a vivid image for this. Quote, "In all circumstances, hold faith as a shield to quench all the flaming arrows of the evil one." End quote. Faith shields us from the vicious attacks of sloth and distraction. To increase your faith, you have only to exercise it. In fact, it is the main exercise in our whole spiritual rehabilitation program. You may have had or know someone who has had the experience of a serious injury and a subsequent reconstructive surgery. The injury occurs in an instant, sliding into second base, slipping on an ice-covered sidewalk, getting sideswiped by a careless driver. The surgery takes a few hours, reconstructing the joint, setting the bone, rebuilding the ligament. But the rehabilitation, that takes months, maybe years, and sometimes it continues for a lifetime. The spiritual life follows a similar path. The human family experienced a fatal spiritual injury when our first parents disobeyed the Father. Christ came to rescue us. With baptism and the other sacraments, He performs the operation that puts our hearts back in communion with God. Then begins the long work of our spiritual rehabilitation, which continues until the day our Lord calls us home to the heavenly kingdom. Faith is the primary exercise in our rehab program, and the more you use it, the stronger it gets. Weak faith gives sloth and distraction free rein. I need stronger faith. How do I strengthen it? By using it, by forming the habit of living in the light of faith. How do you learn to play tennis? You can read books on it, watch films on it, interview experts on it, but if you don't get out there and practice, it will remain dead knowledge. Likewise with faith. It's not enough just to know your faith. You have to live it. You have to practice it. Now you can understand why God doesn't simply zap away all distractions and sloth. It is precisely in overcoming them that we exercise and therefore strengthen our faith. It's like spiritual judo. You use the enemy's own momentum to defeat the enemy. Take, for example, a temptation to slothfulness. The alarm clock goes off. Bleary-eyed, I wake up, and the last thing I feel like doing is getting up to pray. If I cut out my 15 minutes of morning prayer, I can have 15 minutes more sleep. How sweet that sounds. But why did I set my alarm to get up 15 minutes earlier than I need to? Because I made the decision to start out my day with God. Because He is the purpose of my life. Because He deserves my praise, and because I need His grace. A crisis of the heart has arisen. My feelings, egged on by the devil, tell me to hit the snooze button, roll over, and doze off again. My faith, animated by my guardian angel, tells me to turn off the alarm, throw back those cozy covers, touch my bare feet down on that cold tile floor, and make it to my appointment with God. If God wanted to, He could resolve the crisis for me. He could push me out of bed, or make the bed disappear, or give me good feelings about prayer and bad feelings about staying in bed. But He doesn't. At least, not usually. Rather, He leaves it up to me, nudging my conscience, perhaps, but not forcing me either way. Here is where I can use my faith, and in using it, exercise and strengthen it. Or else I can keep it hidden, dormant and wasting away in a forgotten corner of my soul. Distractions work in the same way. I'm at Mass doing my best to follow along and join my heart to the meaning of the words and the actions that make up the ancient ceremony unfolding before me. I get to Mass a bit early, start off concentrating well, but then I notice that the altar servers are wearing tennis shoes. Are they Nike or Reebok? Well, that reminds me about the marketing presentation I have to give in class this afternoon. Professor Donahue will be there. What a tough audience. Suddenly, I hear a chord at the organ. Uh-oh, they're starting to sing the Gloria and I'm already distracted. 3 options open up to me. 1. I keep thinking about the presentation. After all, a lot is hanging on it, and this priest tends to be a bit boring anyway, so I'm sure God will understand. 2. I get distracted by my distraction. There I go again. Why can't I stay focused? I always get distracted. I'm such an idiotic Christian, such a hypocrite. Oh, I'm so mad at myself. Ugh. 3. I calmly steer my attention back to the Mass, renewing my conviction that God and His action here matter far more than my presentation, and that my tendency to get distracted affords me a new opportunity to exercise my faith, to turn back once again to my Lord. Will I choose 1, 2, or 3? If I choose 3, then that distraction, a ploy of the devil to distance me from God, will have become an instrument of God's grace, drawing me closer to Him and giving Him glory. God allows temptations against my communion with God in order to afford me opportunities to deepen that communion. That's how to deal with the most common obstacles to prayer. Judo them. But there's another very practical tactic you can use to lay the groundwork for serious growth in your prayer life. Structure it. Athletes structure their training programs. Musicians structure their rehearsal schedules. Intellectuals structure their research. Growth takes structure. It's a law of nature in this world, and your prayer life is no exception. God doesn't need us to structure it. He can do as He pleases with His gifts, and prayer is indeed one of His greatest gifts. But most of the time, He invites us to collaborate in our spiritual growth. Christ wants us to be friends and fellow workers, not slaves or robots. So He asks us to do our part, assuring us that He will do His. Giving structure to your prayer life is essential to doing your part. A structured prayer life means building your daily activities around key moments of exclusive conversation with God. This assures constant growth in intimacy with Christ and gradually makes it easier to maintain spontaneous, faith-filled contact with Him in the midst of the daily hustle and bustle. The online prayer book at vocation.com offers excellent suggestions for structuring your prayer life on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. You can also get good ideas from a spiritual director or someone more advanced in the spiritual life than yourself. But suggestions will get you nowhere unless you do something with them. A structured prayer life, a program of personal prayer, should have 2 characteristics. It should be demanding, and realistic, just like programs for learning new languages, or losing weight, or getting an academic degree. A demanding program means that you make some kind of sacrifice for the sake of spending time with Christ in prayer. You don't just fit it in when you feel like it, or when you have nothing else to do. A realistic program means that the sacrifice isn't out of proportion with your other commitments and needs. 4 hours a day in the chapel would be unrealistic for a normal college student. 1 Hail Mary before every exam would be undemanding. It will probably take some trial and error to find the structure that works best for you, but the trial and error itself will build your friendship with Christ. The most basic structure will usually follow the natural rhythm of morning, noon, and night. Having 3 spiritual meals a day, plus a few snacks, by dedicating at least a few moments to personal contact with God at each of those times, will help keep your vital and personal relationship with Him fresh and robust. Once you've made a program, you'll have to exercise your willpower and your faith to live it out. Make the commitment to review it every week. Sundays are good days for reviewing your prayer program. In order to examine what changes you should make to it, promise yourself that you will only make adjustments to your program during your weekly review. That way you save yourself from making whimsical, wishy-washy excuses during the week. Developing a deep life of prayer takes consistent effort, guidance, and the grace of God. Without the deep conviction that such a life of prayer is worthwhile, and without the firm decision to undertake the arduous tasks required to develop it, no prayers and no program of prayer will have a lasting impact. As you work to come up with your own program of prayer, be sure that your conviction and decision are solid. If they are, the Holy Spirit will have ample room to construct a worthy temple out of the living stones of your soul. As He Himself put it in Psalm 36, "Make Yahweh your joy, and He will give you your heart's desires. Commit your destiny to Yahweh, be confident in Him, and He will act. Stay quiet before Yahweh, wait longingly for Him." And that's some straight talk about the practice of prayer.
You have been listening to The Catholic Perspective, a resource from rcspirituality.org. Please visit our website and check out more great resources to help you pray, learn, grow, and go. Please join our team of digital missionaries by subscribing at rcspirituality.org.